Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Online Warriors podcast. Before we get into our regular show, we are here with Martin Binfield, the creator of Schrödinger's Cat Burglar, a new indie game that has been developed by him and his studio, Abandoned Sheep Games. How's it going, Martin? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's going well. Yeah, thank you for getting me on the show to talk about the game. It's exciting to have the demo up and have people playing the game and see what people think of it.
Yeah, it's a pretty big milestone. Once again, thanks for, coming on the show and talking about it. But before we get into the game, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I understand you're an animator turned game designer. So can you kind of walk us through your personal journey and how you kind of ended up here?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a long journey. Yeah, I got into the games industry back in the literal year 2000, working at Sony Cambridge in the UK. Worked on a few games there. The first game I worked on was one called Ghost Hunter, which recently came out on the PlayStation 5, like backwards compatible, like catalog thing. So jump into that and you'll probably see like some monsters, which back in those days we were using textures of people's beards and stuff, like teddy bear fur. So you'll see my beard in that game. And yeah, worked on Heavenly Sword while I was there in partnership with Ninja Theory. I was doing animation, Little Big Planet on the PSP. And so all that time I was doing like art and animation jobs essentially. Worked for a smaller indie studio called Mode 7 on a title called Frozen Cortex and did animation work on that. That was a kind of robots playing American football kind of game. Then worked at Jagex on not RuneScape while I was working for them. I was on a concept and I was there until about the year 2018 when I moved from the UK to Australia to be with my wife over here. And at that point, I left the studio job at Jagex and then moved to a country where I didn't know what I was doing essentially and didn't know what the plan was. And at that point, I started to look into like game design and stuff and using Unity. So before that point, I was very much just, animator in games, enthusiast about game design, very much an amateur at programming. And I had the opportunity to just kind of get stuck into playing around with some stuff. And I had an idea for a game that I wanted to explore. So I kind of looked into that. And then, that kind of grew into Schrödinger's Cat Burglar and just, really helped to... I find this thing as well. I think this is true. I've definitely observed it in myself and other people, but I feel like if you're an animator, it's kind of... you eventually end up in programming. I think there's like a weird parallel between things moving in animation and systems running in programming. So it's like a like-minded brain thing. But yeah, I think the pipeline from animator to programmer kind of is a thing, essentially.
It feels like it's one of those, a square can be a rectangle, but a rectangle can't be a square kind of situation. Because let me tell you, animation is hard. It's very, very hard.
Yeah. I often get this as well when I ask people to look at my animations and they'll go, "Oh, I can't comment on this. I'm not an animator." And the really hard thing about animation is that it's not easy to do, but it's really easy to tell if it's done wrong. And so there's like a really kind of like a struggle. Like everyone can tell a bad animation, but like to do a good animation, like correct animation is hard. So yeah, I do enjoy animation, but I've done as little as possible on this project so far. But I've managed to spend some time doing some cute cat jogs and trots and hacks and things like that, so that's good. But yeah, I much prefer doing programming at the minute.
So the game we're talking about, Schrödinger's Cat Burglar, is a co-op game where you're both a cat but also two cats, and you're in really two places at once. When developing this game, this is kind of a lot to it type story. Did you start with the story and the character animations first, or did you jump right into the programming and sort of just let it build itself? And as you're exploring, like you said, Unity, did the concept just kind of come alive?
Thankfully, I have a good anecdote for how this game came to be. So initially, I was working on a completely different game, which featured animals, and I hadn't done modeling for a long time. So I kind of made like a few really low poly like models of things, and I made a cat and I made a dog and things like this. And I kind of iced that project and then looked into a different project, which at the time was called The Entangle Men. And the idea was that you were two burglars who'd been quantum entangled. And that was like the mechanic there. And I had the idea for it. And I was like, I should probably try prototyping this up. I should maybe just try and use a model I've got. And I remember I had the cat model. And then suddenly, like a bolt of lightning, it was like, obviously, you've got entanglement and you've got a cat. Schrödinger's Cat Burglar just sort of like fell into place just from that. So yeah, so it was like the mechanic was not actually...
I'm so glad we asked this question.
Yeah, because it's like, I remember people saying about like there's sometimes when you're writing books, the characters kind of maneuver themselves and put themselves in positions and stuff. And it really felt like the idea for the mechanic And the fact that I was going to like use a cat for it were just like sitting there waiting to be put together. But yeah, so it came from that essentially.
So, you mentioned you had the cat model already ready to go. Do you have any personal attachment to cats or animals in general? Like, do you have a little Mittens at home, maybe?
Very strong attachment to cats. Grew up with cats all my life. Big fan of them. They are like the most funny animal I think that you can own because they're idiots and they're very good. And when I started working on the project, we didn't have a cat, but now we have two. Got Hugo, who's a big, dumb, tabby boy, and Murphy, who's a small black and white cat. Well, she's mostly black. She's just got a splash of white on her chest. But yeah, so when I was doing all the kind of animation stuff for Mittens, it was just from my innate affinity for cats. But like since then, I've been able to base some like animations from the game. So if you've played the game, the bit when Mittens comes around after the machine and her paws are twitching, that's because my cat Hugo sleeps on my desk and I see him dreaming and his paws twitch. So it's very much based on real life from that.
That's incredible.
So the game obviously suggests heavy use of quantum physics. Beyond the classic Schrödinger's cat example, did you find yourself really studying into this topic to deepen your own understanding and then use that learning to create new challenges and abilities?
Yeah, it's been an interesting one because it turns out that I know quite a few quantum engineers in my life through like friends of friends. And whenever I talk to them about the game and describe the mechanics, I can see them getting angrier and angrier because that's not how it works. And I've looked into things like the double slit experiment and things like this, and like trying to find out ways to take inspiration from the field of quantum mechanics and quantum theory and put it into the game as like mechanics. But it all comes down to like the central idea of you being in two places at once. And there's a mechanic that actually it's very core to the experience, but we didn't cover it in the demo. I think I want to tweak the demo and make sure there's a little teaser at the end. But it's the concept of observation. And the idea that, you're in two places, but that's only possible as long as no one's observing. So like later in the game, like security cameras essentially come in and then there's observers. And it means that if you are split and you're observed in one place, you can't exist in the other. And we have a kind of a fun mechanic there to do with what happens to the other cat. But yeah, because that's like the core experience. Everything has to kind of fit around that. And yeah, I haven't found a way to get in, for example, double slit experimentation and things like that in there and wave particle duality. But we do have some things in there. Like you can do this in the demo with the Heisenberg fields. So we've got Heisenberg as a term. And for the benefit of the listeners, Heisenberg fields are these fields that you can only pass through when you're fused, so that when you're split, can't get past them to keep two cats together essentially. But you can't enter a field when you're split. And when you're inside the field, you can't split. But you can be standing on a field generator that is deactivated while split, and that field can activate. And when that happens, you become quantum locked, which is essentially frozen in place. And yeah, so that term quantum lock, I think, is a real thing. It's to do with like super cold magnetic suspension of materials. So we just use it as a mechanic in the game to freeze the cat. So yeah, we're very much like, if it sounds cool, we'll think of a mechanic that sounds like it could be that, but it's not extremely accurate like quantum physics stuff. No.
When the security camera catches the cat, does it turn into a wave type particle?
It waves at the camera.
It waves. Oh, that would be so good.
Yeah, I haven't gone too deep on that one. Wave particle duality is too weird to make a game out of. I think that's the problem.
So, you mentioned that you want to go back and kind of edit the demo to give players a taste of a feature that you haven't featured yet. What other things are you most excited about for players to experience in the full version of the game when that eventually comes out?
I think mechanically speaking, I'm a massive fan of games like Fez, Tunic, Animal Well, all this kind of like Metroid Brainery types, which have got like hidden mechanics you didn't know you could do. Outer Wilds, of course, I should flag that up because that's one of my favorite games. But, and we're not like fully in that space. We're much more of a Portal kind of puzzle game, but I hope that people will find a few mechanics in the game that they didn't realize they could do from the very start, and then they are introduced to later in the game and realize it was under their nose the entire time. I'm also excited just for people to sort of hopefully be surprised by the story. I think it has some interesting stuff in there. So yeah, I think as long as we make it like, land well and yeah, make it interesting to follow, I hope people will be like, there'll be a few twists and surprises for people there.
I'm a very story-driven gamer. Like, I appreciate and love puzzles as well, but every time there's a good story in a game, I latch on. So I'm very excited to see what the full story is going to be.
Yeah, me too. Because it's like, I know the shape of it. We're still, wrestling with the finer details, but I'm fairly certain that like, if we can land the ending, then it'll be really, really good. And I think we will. I think the ending's pretty strong, but I can't say anything about it. I don't want to I want to talk about the game as much as I can. And I also don't want to spoil things. So it's a real fine line to talk about.
My next question might contain spoilers, so feel free to tell me to shush. Are there any other animals in the game, like rats, for example, since they're common test subjects? And within your Steam page, there was a character, Lazy Susan. Does Susan have abilities?
You can see, like, Susan is in the demo. She is your, what's the term from Spider-Man? Like, guy in the chair?
I got Oracle vibes from, like, Batman, for example, but yeah.
Exactly that. I mean, like, I think a big inspiration for the characters, and this is probably a bit too British-centric, but Danger Mouse and Penfold, I don't know if, like, they're cartoon characters from Britain from the 80s and stuff. But anyway, that's, like, it's that whole Snake and Otacon, Sly Raccoon and whatever the name of the turtle was. It's like that kind of, like, role kind of thing between them. But yeah, Lazy Susan being a hedgehog, I think she's a bit of a secret weapon for the game because she's a very endearing character. And yeah, so she's very cool. Other animals in the game, we definitely make reference to other animals, but we are a little bit budget restricted in terms of what we can actually represent in the game. So there definitely are other animals present in the world, but we may not feature them like visually in the game. But yeah,
maybe that's sequel content.
Oh man, so much for the sequel. We've got many things we'd love to explore with infinite budget. But yeah, we're currently making this game taut and lean and muscular, to use like business terminology, to try and make it like as good as it can be with the budget that we have available to make it like really punchy, I guess is the word to put it.
So you started this project as a solo developer, and obviously, your funding and your team has also grown over time. What are some of the pros and cons to, when you were working alone versus now having to share your idea and the creation of, basically your brainchild with a small team behind your work now?
It's been a real up and down on the game. Like, to get into the weeds a little bit, if you go like searching around online, you'll probably find like interviews and stuff with me and maybe footage of the game from a few years ago. And you'll see that it was quite different. At that point, there was a third-person chase camera to the game. And then since then, we've kind of refined it into a Little Nightmare style doll's house side camera, fourth wall removed kind of view. Yeah, so like I started off like solo and I was working on the game and it was essentially a top-down game, like different again. And then I had some interest from people who were like, we think this looks great. We want to put some money into the project. And I said, yes. The budget increased. During that period, it's this idea of like, oh, maybe we should look into making the game a bit more like grander in scope, which is where third person camera mode came in. So around about that period, there was like a number of different people working on the game and the scope increased. I'll cut back to the question in a second, but ultimately, like, we decided after exploring that even though it was really, really cool to have a camera behind the cat like in Stray, it kind of broke the central mechanic. So we pulled back from it a little bit. But at that point, we had a team of 6 or 7, I think it was. There was quite a few people working on it. We had like, audio team, composer, narrative designer, support programmer, puzzle designer, me, and an artist. And then we've subsequently come down for now to a smaller group, which is just me and the artist working on it. But at that time, we had a bunch of people. And I found it really exciting. I think I would be very happy to be in that state again soon, which we will be getting to, I think, as we get closer to like finishing the game off. But like, there's that definite balance of if you still have questions to answer, you don't want to have too many people because you have to have things for people to do and you don't want to give them stuff that ultimately might change. And I think that's a little bit of what happened in that period. Like, I think we had so much great stuff from all these collaborators. I mean, for example, all the kind of the gags that work really well in the demo, they're from Elliot, our narrative designer. All the things about like Lazy Susan having too many tabs open and things like this. And like, that was really, really good to like sort it out. But because the game kind of changed form a little bit, like we've reduced ourselves down. So it's just me and Ziggy, who's the artist and level designer on the project. And working like that right now is like a real sweet spot. Like when it was just me on my own and I was just doing what I wanted to, it was fine. But also I didn't have a kind of another brain to bounce ideas off. Having a second brain definitely helps, like getting input from that. But then if you have like 7 brains, it gets a bit more, there's too much bouncing. Yeah, like you have to keep the brain spinning. I think that's a mixed metaphor about plates, but yeah, there's a lot of like stuff to worry about there. So I think, we're getting close to that point where it's again going to be a case of like just ramp up, get more people on board and just make stuff. But before getting there, like in the really interesting part of game design where you're coming up with stuff, it's really nice to just be able to like have a few people who can make a big impact and are not spinning the wheels, as it were.
For sure. So you described some moments during the development process when you had to step back and rethink a design choice or direction. How did you approach making those tough decisions?
I don't know how to answer this. Like, not with gusto, not with courage, just through necessity, I guess. Like everything I've done like on this game essentially is because I think it's good and I want it to exist. And so it's very hard. Like this isn't we haven't like targeted a market with this. Like I've kind of just had the idea for the game and wanted to make it, and people foolishly believed in me. So it's very much on me to make it like good. And yeah, it's that thing of where I just kind of keep looking at the game and working out what kind of game would I want to play, and is it working for what the game I would want to play? And if it isn't, what would make it be that game I want to play? And so things like, we designed a whole bunch of like levels in third person. And then when we moved away from that, because it was like it was an unworkable thing with the mechanic of being in control of 2 characters at once. We tried various things like having a camera that swapped between them. We tried when you were split, the camera was top down, and when you fused, it was a third person, and just nothing felt right. And then when we went to the side view and it made everything work, it was like, this is clearly the right decision to go with. This makes sense of the game. So all the level designs we'd done, which were in like third person view, we did throw them out, but we didn't bin them, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like we kind of took what we were doing there. And especially with the puzzles, like you'll have seen the demo that when you go into some puzzles, the camera lifts up and looks straight down, because we're not like a side view game. We're not like a 2D game. Sorry. We're like a 3D game. Mm-hmm. We're just viewed from one angle. So a lot of those puzzles still work, like the same design is just like carried straight over.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was that thing of like, judiciously looking through it and making the right call at the time to keep going forward in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, you said
that
something.
Answers the question.
Yeah, it does. You said something that really resonated with me. I'm going to shout out a book that I read recently. It's called Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. They kind of interviewed different game developers and things like that. And one of the hardest questions that was addressed in that book is, the game looks awesome, the plot is great, but is it fun? And having to make these tough decisions to determine, is this a fun game? Is this something that people play? Is one of the hardest things that I think you can answer without having some kind of bias. So I really like the answer and the way you approach that question.
Is it fun for a game? Is also that thing where if we were doing a game with shooting, then you can kind of just make replicatable fun over and over. And when you have a non-violent game like ours, you don't have that option. So it's like you have to really think about what is going to be fun for the audience there.
One of the things I was just going to say that I've always found super fun, and I'm always clamoring for more of this, is couch co-op. And so I'm super jazzed that, that's something that you're including in Schrödinger's Cat Burglar. How did you approach designing the gameplay with multiplayer in mind? And what sort of challenges has that presented as you're, working through the development process?
Yeah, like one of the big challenges there was when we went to third person, we had to drop it. And I was like, that's a shame. Mm-hmm. Like when I initially started it and when it was top down, like the idea of controlling both cats at once with the sticks felt good. And then it was a natural extension from there to make it into a 2-player game. And the key thing for it is that there isn't a single player campaign and a co-op campaign. It's the same thing. And it's that idea that one player can solve every puzzle and 2 players can solve every puzzle. It's just like you've got an extra brain. Mm-hmm. And you're like, we're trying to make it, the goal with the puzzle design is that for every puzzle that is, a progress blocker, is you can complete it only moving one cat at a time. So we never require players to do dexterous control movement things of like move this cat and that cat together. And then we want to make sure that there are some bonus puzzles that will, supply the side of players who want to really test their own dexterity, or co-op players who want to have a bit more challenge than that. But yeah, we're not going to change dynamically in the game how the puzzles work if there's one player or 2. We do have a system in there which I think is kind of cool. I don't think anything else does it really, but it's like a request system. So you can use the right stick to, I guess it's kind of like a ping system from Portal 2, but one player can kind of indicate to the other player what they want them to do with sticks and buttons and things like that. So like, I want you to go over here and I want you to interact with this and things. So that kind of helps things. But yeah, we are couch co-op. So, you can just yell at each other. So it's all there.
So how did you approach designing the various puzzles in the game, and what was the process of making them challenging but fair?
Continuously is probably the answer to that, like iteratively and over. We're playtesting a lot at the minute because we're doing the design of like the later game levels and like grey boxing them. And I'll run them past people. I've got some local game developer friends who'll jump in and play the levels. It's very hard to play test a puzzle game that escalates as well, because if you want people to play test level 7, they'll have to have played levels 1 to 6 to know what they're doing. So yeah, it's kind of, you've got a diminished resource there. But it's just constantly surprising. Things that I think are not hard in a puzzle is like, it's a consistent, like massive spike in difficulty at certain points. And me and Ziggy, when we're designing these puzzles, we don't see that. And then when people play test it and everyone gets hit on the same point, we go, oh, I see. Yeah, that is a massively difficult concept to just throw in there at the same time. So yeah, it's very much just, play test it and see how people get on with it. Like that's like, Valve did this with Portal and that's how the game turned out so well, is they just kept play testing it over and over. And we don't have the resources to do it that extensively, but yeah, we're doing our best to get it like into shape so that.
I hope you're prepared for people are going to solve puzzles in ways you never dreamed of.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting part with the game as well, is that we kind of, I'm hoping that we can have the game bounce from like explicitly, this is a puzzle room and there'll be one solution that we intend, to you're now in a world and you can use the powers you've picked up, and it's not immersive sim, but it's very much like, oh, just do what, it's not going to be a prescribed solution. You can just do things to get through stuff. And yeah, but I'm very keen to see people solve puzzles in multiple ways and ways I was not expecting, definitely.
So for others who might be interested in, getting started making their own game, going down the road of solo development, do you have any words of wisdom that you've, kind of learned along the way? Yeah,
so I've been working on this game since 2018 and it's been a long time, right? I've not at any point not enjoyed. I've enjoyed the process the entire way through, but it is a long slog. But I think a lot of people often say, when you're getting into making your own games, you should do something small and finish it. And I had a problem like myself on that front because I just didn't think of anything small enough that I would be interested in completing. So I think, I would say for people who do want to get into this sort of thing is like, don't be afraid to start like a project that feels a little bigger than you think you might need to get into, but be prepared be prepared to give up on it or, stick with it for the long term. But yeah, I think like going through and like grow things bit by bit as well. Like that's the thing with like, this is iteration 3 of the project, I think. And it's like dated. I threw the code base out and started again 3 times to get to this point. And the last time I did it was 2020. So this is like 5 years worth of like, this same code base just building up and up and up. And as long as you kind of like approach things in a smart way to make it so that if you need to change something that you worked on before, you can, and everything else will still work around it, then, your game can just get bigger or smaller or whatever. But yeah, I think that's the only thing I'd say really is like, work on something you want to work on. That'll make you work on it,
All right. Well, if anyone is interested in checking out this game, can be found on Steam. It is Schrödinger's Cat Burglar, and we are very excited for when it comes out. Do you have a date when you expect that it might be able to be playable for release?
It's difficult to say at this stage, so I probably should just say no comment. That's probably the appropriate like business game developer kind of way to approach this. Yeah, like hopefully not too long, but yeah, I cannot put a pin.
We will hold you to hopefully not too long, legally.
Oh no, I've made a rod for my back now.
All right, well, thank you again for sitting down with us. We loved having this chat, and we are excited for when this game hopefully does come out.
Yeah, any last words you want the listeners to know before we kind of sign off and head to the break?
No, not particularly. I think, just thank you for being interested. And if you've played the demo in the past, or if it's still up, I'm not sure when this will air, but yeah, keep an eye on the Steam page. Engage, come at us with comments and things like that. But thank you very much for being part of the journey. And thank you both for having me on for this interview.
Thank you very much.
All right, and now we're going to head into the break.
Hey there, everybody. Seth Heasley here from the Hugo's There podcast. Every month on the podcast, I have on a guest, and we discuss their choice of the winners of the Hugo Award for Best Novel. So if you're interested in nerdy books and nerds discussing books, head over to hugospodcast.com or search for Hugo's There anywhere you get your podcasts. Thank you so much.
All right, and we're back from the break. We want to thank Martin again for an amazing conversation. Super fun talking to him. Make sure you guys check out Schrödinger's Cat Burglar. It'll actually be featured in the Cerebral Puzzle Showcase on Steam at the end of the month. So check it out there. It's really cute, really fun. You won't regret it. And shout out to our fantastic Patreon producers, Mr. Stephen Keller and Lloyd Weldy. They are subscribed to us at the night level, which is the highest tier of our Patreon subscriptions. With their subscription, they get this weekly shout out as well as occasional guest spots on the show, access to our monthly secret segment and our monthly video vlog, as well as voting rights on what our secret segment topic will be. If you want to be as cool as Steven and Lloyd, or maybe just a little bit less cool, but still very, very cool, you can check us out at patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast, and you'll find 3 different tiers of patronage: the page, the squire, and the knight. There's fun perks for everybody. We have extra content. We hope we keep you entertained, and we really appreciate it because it helps us keep the lights on here at the Online Warriors podcast. So again, shout out to Steven and Lloyd, and let's get back into it. We're going to make our first foray into the news segment without our good pal Legal. This is the very first episode without him during his hiatus. And what better way to celebrate than talking about all of the superhero shit that he hates?
And we're going to have nothing but positive takes.
Yeah, so
whoa.
This week we're covering the new Superman trailer. We're going to be talking about Spider-Noir, which actually I feel like he would like to talk about that just because he has a big crush on Nicolas Cage. And
we're passive aggressively covering the Cage.
Yeah, we are. And then we'll also be talking about Marvel's Ironheart trailer, which is a new Disney Plus show that dropped a trailer this week. So let's get into it. Techtic, which one do you want to talk about first?
Let's start it up with Ironheart.
All right. So we got the first trailer for Ironheart, which is going to be produced by Ryan Coogler, who, he's known for so many movies, most recently Sinners, which blew up the box office. And in this trailer, we see, the first evidence of Riri Williams after Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And if you guys, I guess this is a little bit of a spoiler, but that movie came out in 2022. So if you haven't seen it yet and you're...
Keep up, guys.
Well, with the MCU, you can't not keep up. You'll be super confused with what's going on. But at the end of that movie, she had made her own version of the Iron Man suit, and the Wakandans didn't let her keep the armor at the end of the film. So she goes back to Chicago, and in this series, it looks like she's going to be building her own, but she's getting a lot of help from some shady looking characters. There's some magic looking stuff going on. There looks like there's some heist robbery stuff going on. Techtic, how did you feel about this so far? How did you feel about the vibe of the show? It does feel distinctly different from a lot of other Marvel and MCU shows and movies in terms of the vibe. It definitely feels a little grittier. How do you feel about that?
So the thing about Riri Williams is she's not, I want to stress, she's not dumb at all.
Oh no, she's supposed to be super smart in all of this.
And they covered that from the technical capabilities, but also there's a significant amount of naivety to this that I don't really care for. So in the comic books, she had built her suit by basically stealing odds and ends from the MIT campus. She didn't partner with a bunch of burglars and get into trouble that way. It was kind of within her own bubble. Whereas this, it seems like she's completely naive to what is trouble.
Yeah, she's partnering with the Hood, who seems like a bad character. And not by bad character, not a likable character, but he just seems like a bad guy.
Yeah, and just to make a suit where I don't know, I think it takes it puts in this pigheadedness to her, and I think that's not doing her a service. But I will say, just kind of unrelated to personality wise, the thing that gets me most excited about this is we're moving away from the stupid nano suits. Once Iron Man dropped those like nano easy CGI suits where they just kind of phase onto the person, all of a sudden every hero had it, and it was just like kind of lazy. There's something to be said about just taking off a physical hard mask, not a suit that just materializes and then vanishes into nowhere. This is where true cinema takes place. This is where good effects are a thing.
Well, it'll be really interesting because this is kind of a return to roots for the MCU. Like, if you really go back and analyze what kind of catapulted the MCU into greatness, it really started with Tony Stark, and he was a superhero, but he didn't have superpowers. I mean, we all know that already. But like, he used his brain to build a suit, and it kind of seems like this could be a return to form and kind of, I don't want to call it a reboot because I feel like the MCU has kind of been soft rebooted so many times. But it kind of is like a return to roots where she's building this based on her brains. And I don't really necessarily love the infusion of magic into this. Like, the Hood obviously is bringing elements of magic. And in my opinion, I think when Iron Man and the Iron Man family of characters stand the strongest is when they're just leaning on science and technology. So, like, I'm a little disappointed that they're bringing some magical stuff into it. But I feel like now that they've introduced magic into the MCU, it's kind of like once you've let the cat out of the bag, you can't shove it back in. You know, you've squeezed the toothpaste out of the tube. That it's too late. So magic is pervasive in the MCU, so kind of had to expect that. But yeah, I'm very intrigued. I haven't watched a lot of MCU stuff lately. I feel like all of the Disney Plus shows I just haven't gotten into. I can't even remember the last one that we like fully committed to. I want to say it was like She-Hulk. And honestly, I didn't hate She-Hulk. Like, it wasn't as bad. Like, the CGI was rough, and it was definitely too tongue-in-cheek for what I think people wanted from it. I didn't think it was horrible. That said, I think that was the last thing that we watched. It might have been the last Disney Plus show we watched, period. So
I do want to make one comment about something you said
Yeah, go for it.
That Iron Man's story arc is very tech-based. Iron Man 2 had a lot of, like, science fiction-y. Remember there was the fire guy? And so that kind of...
I hear you, but like Tony Stark himself did not have magic on his side.
No, I agree with you there, but he's gone toe-to-toe with magic-esque abilities within the MCU.
I don't disagree, but it seems like she will be relying on the Hood and this team of people who have magic powers to kind of like help her along, and I kind of wish she just like stands on her own, you know, and makes her own suit without having magic in her corner. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, she can fight magic. I just don't want her to like be on the side of magic.
I think there's definitely going to be a kind of go off on her own and bail on these people. So I wouldn't be super worried there. It's not like the suit is going to be powered by friendship. So I think we'll be okay there.
Powered by friendship.
But like I said, I like that she's kind of finding her way. I want to see these trials and tribulations against various cast and crew. I'm for this. I really am. And again, as long as the MCU just moves back to its roots and gets away from the gimmicky and the cheap CGI, I think I can see this as a foray back into the MCU, honestly.
So this is going to take part over a 6-episode miniseries, and I feel like we've talked about this a lot in the past. But do you feel like it does this character a disservice to kind of relegate her and kind of her backstory? Like, I know she's obviously already been in, you know, Wakanda Forever, but this is kind of like her origin story.
That did her a disservice, having that first.
Yeah?
I think it cheapens the buildup of this suit because she's already done it, right? It just got like, we've already seen her in this suit. And so there's a little bit less hype. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I feel like honestly, all of the different comic book movies have really mishandled how they're introducing new superheroes. I feel like they've just kind of fumbled the bag on a lot of introductions and backstories. And I feel like we've talked about this too a lot on the show, but when we're talking about like the Young Avengers and the New Avengers and stuff and all of these characters, I feel like this whole experience has been so piecemealed. And honestly, even the timeline, like I feel like this should have came out first, like what they did with Hawkeye, where she was introduced, we got to know her as a character, we got to see her come up to the ranks as a solo act as opposed to thrown in a movie. Honestly, like I can't help but feel though that Disney Plus as a whole was a little bit of a stumble. I feel like introducing TV shows it killed some momentum because while there were too many movies coming out and too many tertiary characters that people didn't care about, it just, I don't know, something about having to go and watch a TV show to understand what's happening just feels weird. And even with Hawkeye, like, yeah, it was a great introduction to the character, but then that character has been put on ice for years at this point. And I know part of it, there was just that interview with Jeremy Renner on a podcast recently about how part of the reason they didn't do a second season is because they didn't offer him enough money. And he was just like, well, no, then I'm not doing it. So like, obviously there's stuff like that came into play, but it just feels like a lot of these characters, like there's just not a lot of momentum behind the MCU. So also, maybe this will like turn the page.
Those who heard that and winced at Jeremy Renner, it's not that they didn't offer him enough money. They offered him less money than what he did in the first season. So it's kind of spitting in his face. And I stand on business, Jeremy. I respect it.
I'm all about that. I wonder in part if they were trying to reduce his role, because obviously I feel like they wanted to move forward with the Young Avengers and maybe have Haley Steinfeld like be the pinnacle of the show. So maybe they were trying to like shelve him a little bit. But I do feel like he has every right to be like, hey, like I should get more money than this. I am a star in my own right. So yeah, the MCU is in a weird place. And I feel like superhero stuff in general is just kind of in a weird place. And I really hope that it all kind of turns around. And I'm going to use this as a segue to talk about Superman, because that feels like another franchise, you know, the big DC universe getting a reboot here. This is a brand new Superman, brand new full-length trailer for us to kind of dissect. And what we saw in this trailer was really a lot of, you know, I guess background. This is an established Superman. You know, we're not getting a Smallville Superman who's trying to establish himself for the very first time. He's not learning the ropes. He's with Lois Lane. She knows who he is already. She's interviewing him as Superman, and they're talking about hard things that he's done as Superman already. And some of the hard questions that always seem to come up around superheroes, especially when they start talking about how superheroes and governments kind of intersect. And you know, there's that question that Lois Lane is asking him, like, are you considering the impacts of your actions? And he's just kind of like, I'm just trying to save people.
People were dying. Right. Okay. That line was executed beautifully. And let me tell you something. This movie is going to do great. Do you want to know why?
Because Crypto is cute as fuck.
Because this is not another Superman movie. This is a Clark Kent movie. This is a movie about his humanity. And I feel like we haven't seen that in quite some time, especially when we talk about like the Snyderverse, where he's basically just this. He's a human, and he's like this present being, but also it's like Superman. You don't get to see a lot of Clark Kent's humanity and what makes him. Yes, he's an alien, right? But what separates him from a superpowered alien is the fact that he was raised human, that he has that internal desire to be a good person, to contribute to society, and he just wants to help people. And that's what makes Superman good, and not this overpowered, self-righteous thing.
And I think too, I mean, we've talked about this too, part of what plagued the DC EU was that it was so dark and gritty. And something about this, and I know they're talking about, you know, how Superman's motives and the ramifications of his actions are being called into question. And it looks like at one point he's being captured and, you know, held for, I don't know if it's torture or interrogation or what have you, by Lex Luthor. But this still felt more hopeful than any DC movie I have seen in like the last 15 years. Like there was something just lighter about this. And they're talking about the serious issues that Superman is facing.
This was lighter?
I felt like this trailer there was something a little bit more hopeful.
It was balanced is what it was.
I guess, yeah, more balanced is probably the better, you know, phrasing of it. But I felt like every other DC movie that we've had in the last iteration of the DC universe was just so dark and gritty and mired in just angst. And there was no, you know, hopeful dichotomy to balance out the darkness. And I feel like this, and I know I'm gonna, you know, I'm very predictable. Crypto is cute as heck, but I think even just pulling back from the cuteness of Crypto, the wholesome relationship of Lois and Clark being put in the forefront here, I feel like even in past iterations, like you don't really see their relationship.
Dynamic. No, yeah, this is
a better dynamic, and I love it. And I think part of it is the casting, and this is no shade to Amy Adams, who was the last Lois Lane, but like the casting here is fantastic.
I really hope you're going to say Lex Luthor. Fantastic casting. Absolutely stellar.
I think the casting of Rachel Brosnahan, though, is very inspired. I mean, she's sharp and quick and witty, but there's also something that's just like delightful about her to balance that out. And I think the interaction between her and Clark Kent is just, it's great. I do agree with you. The Lex Luthor casting is really good. I wasn't sure how I felt about it at first when I first saw Nicholas Hoult being cast as Lex Luthor, but I'm really buying into it. And I don't know, there's something about this. It's just, I am really into this. I'm feeling it.
So now the other question is, it's not just a Superman movie. We also saw Mr. Terrific, Green Lantern, specifically. Hawkgirl. Do you think they have a place in this movie, or do you think it's too much?
I mean, some of those characters are going to be introduced in Peacemaker this summer as well. That said, I'm interested to see if they'll learn from the past mistakes. Like, I think one of the biggest issues with Justice League was that, again, they just kind of threw a bunch of characters together. They didn't give them their own backstory. They didn't give us enough reason to care about them. And as long as they don't do that, like maybe they're just going to introduce them here and they're going to have their own spin-off movies. Like, I could see that maybe being a thing. I'm not really sure, though. I have to see how it's executed.
So basically what you're saying is it just needs to be introductionary level, and they just kind of need to be supporting cast and crew. We can't focus on them. Let them do their own thing.
Right, exactly. Because I think that was the biggest problem with Justice League, is that they introduced all these characters and then they were pivotal characters in that movie. And it was just like, well, I got maybe like 15 to 20 minutes with each of you. I don't really feel connected to you. And even, honestly, I'm a big Flash fan. Casting aside, but like, it was just, I didn't feel any sort of way towards any of those characters. And I just, they got to learn from the execution.
Like it's setting up to not care about those characters as well. You've already been introduced to them. Who cares?
I don't know if I necessarily agree, because I think we're going to get drip dropped, and then maybe they're going to have their own features later. Because we're going to get a drip of them in Peacemaker. We're going to get a drip of them maybe in Superman. And then maybe then it's just setting the stage for them to kind of be like, okay, well, they're characters in this universe. And then at some point they're going to get their own movies. Based on the casting of those characters, I really don't think, and this, I don't mean to like throw around the word waste, but I feel like they wouldn't waste those actors on a mere cameo in a couple different, properties. I feel like they cast those people to have those roles in bigger movies. I don't know. I could be wrong.
I mean, Nathan Fillion alone has a huge cult following. So I think if he just got flushed away after this, there'd be some blowback.
I mean, you even look at what happened with the Fantastic Four, and where did they show up? Was that in, which movie was that? Where the John Krasinski Fantastic Four came in, and then they immediately, again, this is spoilers, I guess, but they immediately died, and people were kind of pissed off. Like, they wanted to see those characters fleshed out with those actors a little bit more. So especially too, like, coming off of The Last of Us, Isabella Merced is Hawkgirl. I feel like she's gotten a lot of attention in the last little bit. Like, they won't want to waste that casting. This is all like WB properties, they're kind of like investing in their own.
Yeah,
so
it's kind of riding the hype train now. Get it while the getting's good.
And they definitely have put marketing behind that. So I don't know. I guess I have to see. I'm very hopeful about this. I haven't felt hopeful about a DC property in a really long time, but I'm actually pretty hopeful about this. And I will be dragging you to go see this. Maybe at the drive-in.
The drive-in list is getting pretty big.
We're going to be very busy this summer because this movie is coming out July 11th. So maybe I struggle to say 4th of July week because it'll be after the 4th of July, but I think we're going to be really busy going to drive-in movies. There's a lot I want to see this summer.
I'm in.
And now, last but not least, and the thing I think we have the least information about, we did get a teaser trailer for Spider-Man Noir, which is going to be a series coming to Prime Video. And what surprised me, so I knew that there was going to be a series, a spinoff kind of the Spider-Verse, where Nick Cage plays, Spider-Noir as the voice actor, but this is going to be live action. And it's all black and white, but Nicolas Cage is live action Spider-Noir. And we kind of see a little bit of clips about, the vibe, like how the vibe and atmosphere of the show is going to look like. We don't get a ton of information here aside from pretty much knowing that Nick Cage is playing this character. Techtic, what did you think about this? Are you excited for this?
So the last time I saw something in this vein was when we had the scenes of Rorschach in Watchmen.
Rorschach,
yes. I just ignore me. In Watchmen, and I loved the way that was done. I loved the gritty art style. I love everything about that. And when we saw this trailer and it was beautifully black and white, and then you just see the white eyes, perfect execution, absolutely stellar. Dare I say, no notes. The only thing that I would just kind of like, I guess, hesitate is, how do you feel about Nick Cage's movement?
So this is going to be a hot take. I know Illegal loves him some Nick Cage, and I don't disagree. Nick Cage is a great actor, but there has been some weird shit that he's done lately, and I don't always love it. I think he's done some really quirky roles. I feel like his movement sometimes is really herky-jerky and weird for me, so I don't know.
No, I mean like his age. Like he's moving like Spider-Man in this, but we can't forget he's 61 years old.
I get you. I feel like though, so this is supposed to take place in the 1930s. He's supposed to be a PI, and you know, he's older now. I think this character is older, and he was a superhero in his like quote unquote past life, but he's kind of retired into just being a PI. So I think if you're Spider-Man, if you're a superhero and you have these special powers, I don't think they go away with age. I mean, you shouldn't have them to begin with. So maybe he'll be a little bit slower, but compared to a normal human being, he's still going to be superior. Like he's going to have better strength, speed, senses, all that kind of stuff.
You're touching on what I really want to see here, and that is we can't see a lot of Spider-Man combat. What we want to see is a lot more Spider-Man detective.
I think that's what we're going to get. And I think the quote unquote combat that we're going to see is going to be a little bit more stealth stuff. Like maybe he's going to be hanging up from a ceiling and drop down on somebody. And I don't think you need a lot of strength or power to be able to, you know, take someone by surprise and knock them out. I just know from playing the PlayStation games, like I'm not very strong as a person, but I was just dropping down on people and webbing them up, whip. So I feel like maybe we'll get more of that and a little bit less like hand-to-hand combat.
And he doesn't even need to drop down. If he's just in the corner taking notes.
Or that too.
You know what I mean? Like there's a level of gravitas and like coolness about just being literally a fly on the wall.
In a trench coat.
Right? I mean, that's what's so cool about this story. And if they go about it that way, where it's he fights when he needs to fight, but really it's just he's a fly on the wall, he's observing, he's trying to solve mysteries. That's where this is going to shine, baby. And this will be absolutely fantastic if they do it that way.
I think even too, because this is set in its own universe and it's a period piece, I think if they do this right, this can really be a standout property. I'm just thinking of stuff like the Penguin, which was, again, obviously this is not Marvel, but the Penguin was DC, but that was kind of its own like spin-off of kind of like a period piece, dark and broody, not superhero show. Like it was, but it wasn't. And it was super successful. So I feel like this could very easily kind of step into shoes like that and just be its own thing. Don't try to tie back into all of these other superheroes. Maybe make a nod at Into the Spider-Verse or something like that, but try to keep it its own separate thing. I really hope that they don't try to, you know, interweave it with the rest of the Spider-Mans or MCUs. Just like let it be its own thing. Let it be something super cool. And I think too, because this is coming out on MGM Plus and Prime Video, I feel like that the way that it's launching on a completely different streaming platform than almost literally anything else that we've seen from either superhero, you know, major universe. I feel like that kind of says something too about how they're going to try to like interweave it. I feel like it's going to just be its own thing. And I'm really excited for it. Unfortunately, we don't have any information about its release timing. It's now in post-production and they're saying it'll release in 2026, but we don't have any sort of firm release date or time window or anything like that. So we have a bit of waiting to do. I mean, 2026 is startlingly only 6 months away, really.
Yikes.
But I mean, we still don't know. It could be the end of 2026, whatever. But Techtic, is it safe to say this is something on our list of things to watch?
If it was a movie, I'd be dragging you to the drive-in theater.
I mean, hey, we have a projector, we have a screen, we have a fire pit. I'm just saying, we could watch this outside. We could have premiere nights. We could, you know, have all the friends over and make it a thing. All the friends.
All right, I'm holding you to it.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, so that kind of wraps up our news segment for this week. Like I said, it was very, very superhero heavy, but I feel like this was a lot of exciting stuff. Hopefully we maintained the optimism. I'm trying to think of like what a contrarian take that Illegal would have had on any of these things are. Tech, did you get any ideas? Do you want to channel your inner Illegal and give a contrarian take for us?
It's going to be on Ironheart. He's going to say, who cares? Who cares? Another MCU thing. Who cares? That's what he'd say. But like,
Do you think he'd at
We
least get a
care.
kick out of Nick Cage? I feel like he'll like that.
I think that would have been our entire show. Our entire show would have been Nick Cage and how handsome he is.
I mean, he does have a Nick Cage pillow. Did we get it for him? I'll
Yes.
never tell. All right, so before we wrap this up, I know this has kind of been an extended episode because of the interview in the first half, but we still want to touch on what we've been up to. Techtic, I'm going to put the ball in your court. What have you been up to this week?
Wednesday.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to do the full jingle?
No.
Oh.
All right. So the main thing that I want to talk about is, well, I got a couple of things that I want to talk about. First thing is we went golfing as a throuple.
A throuple, he says.
Me, Illegal, and Nerdbomber all went
See, we're not
golfing.
broken up, guys. We're not broken up. He's still around.
And it got rained out, but honestly, it was a solid 5 holes. I'm super rusty. Nerdbomber and Illegal played phenomenally.
I did not. I'll give myself a little bit of credit. So I sprained my thumb. We also play volleyball with Illegal, and I sprained my thumb on Thursday. And then we went golfing on Saturday. And I've got this like incredibly large, it's not a cast, but it's a big like spica splint or whatever they call it. But the one that the urgent care that I went to had was like the full wrist thing. So I had no motion in my wrist. It was wild. And I whacked the ball a few times. I had a few good hits.
You played well. Where I really shined was the tacos and tortilla chips after the fact. We got tacos after. That's
the best part of golfing, man. The best
That's where
part.
my strong suit is taking that to town. So that was absolutely fantastic. And then the other thing I want to talk about, which is a bit of a rant,
I do love a rant.
We watched a terrible movie.
Oh, I almost blocked this out. Honestly, I thought I came into this episode and I was like, we're going to talk about this. And then somewhere over the last 24 hours, I like burned it out of my brain.
We watched Drive Away Dolls, and I really want to retcon one of the previous episodes that we had where we had talked about.
We talked about, I think it was Ethan Cohen. There was the new movie.
Yeah.
We talked about the
This
trailer
man
that dropped.
can't make a movie. This movie was weirdly fetishizing and like just it wasn't real people. They weren't real people. And
They were all very much so caricatures of people, and
Yeah.
it didn't hit. At
And
least
then-
not for us. It
and
did
like
not hit.
there was some weird psychedelic stuff that they tied in the end, but like just because you tie it in the end doesn't mean like it's like tying your shoes with the loop, swoop, and pull, the rabbit, and then you bring up a fox. There's a log. There's a crick. None of these things, just because you tied it together, that doesn't make it work. It doesn't work. He stopped making movies. Like, this was not
Bold.
good. And I don't understand how it even had a 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. Wild to me. 10 out of 10, do not recommend.
Honestly, I think the worst part about it was this had been on our list for a long time because the trailer makes it look
It looks like a fun coming-of-age film.
not even necessarily coming of age, but it looks like almost, I don't want to call it like a thief type movie or like a heist type movie, but kind of like an unwitting heist adventure. And it wasn't really. I'm not even sure the main characters knew they were in a heist for like 75% of the movie. And it just felt like so many missed opportunities. It was rough. It was a bust.
And like, I really like Geraldine. I'm going to butcher her name. Vishwanathan. She's a fantastic actress. And I feel like it just wasn't fair to her. Like, this movie makes me upset. Anyway, over to you, Nerdbomber.
All right. So for me, while I wasn't watching bad movies and golfing, I was finishing up the 5th book in the Throne of Glass series. As you guys know, I think I've talked about this a little bit, but I've been reading through this entire series and I'm getting towards the end of it. I believe there's 7 books in total. I have the entire box set. I've been chipping my way through these books and they've been great so far, but something about Empire of Storms, which is the 5th book, the first half of the book just wasn't hitting for me. And I don't know if it was just like the change in the weather or we got really busy, but I couldn't get into a good flow state with it until about halfway through the book. And then all of a sudden last night I was like, oh damn, I finished. And it basically went from like 0 to 1,000 for me. So I finished that. I'm enjoying the series so far. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend doing what I'm doing and reading them all back to back to back to back to back to back to back like I am. It's getting to be a lot. And I feel like I might need a little bit of a palate cleanser before I go into the last 2 books, especially because I've heard the last 2 books get kind of heavy. So I might take a little bit of a break before, going into the finales of the series. But so far, I have really been enjoying it. I do think like I said, the 5th book might be the weakest one that I've read in the series so far, at least the first half of it, because every other entry in the series I've basically devoured from start to finish. And like I said, this one just started kind of slow for me. And then the other thing I want to talk about was brunch. We did go to brunch. I had a nice wine frosé slushy. Like I said, so I have this sprained thumb. I can't really play video games right now, so I'm kind of relegated to like watching stuff and reading stuff.
We had a fantastic food weekend.
We did have a really good food weekend. So yeah, we went out to brunch. I got fantastic. It was like a stuffed pepper breakfast sandwich, which was super tasty, and like a frosé cocktail, which was really tasty, and a ton of coffee. And I know we've talked about this in the past as well, but like getting coffee at a restaurant or a banquet, it's just better. It slaps. I don't know if they brew it differently or
we're talking
what.
better than like your like Dunkin' Donuts or
it's
your
better
chain.
than being at home. It's better than getting it from like a drive-thru or a chain. It's just, it hits different, and it was so good. And then we had a really good Reese's Pieces waffle.
Table waffle. You
Yes.
get your savory, that's your meal, and then you get your sweet as your shareable. 10 out of 10 recommend this approach.
And then the nice thing too was we didn't finish the table waffle, so then we each had like a quarter of a waffle. So when we were watching The Last of Us, we were able to, finish off a little bit of table waffle, which is great because I don't want to give any spoilers, but it was one of the longest episodes of the season, I think, and it was
I thought you were going to give spoilers on the waffle flavor.
Oh, no. Spoilers on The Last of Us.
I don't want to give spoilers, but it was Reese's.
No, this was, I think it's the 6th episode, so not the last, but the second to last episode in season 2 of The Last of Us, and it was really good. It was longer than the other episodes that we've had so far, and it was just very emotional and touching and just very, very well done. So the waffle really complemented it super well. And with that, any last words, Techtic, before we sign off for the week?
Nope, that's all I got to say.
All right, so we'll talk at you guys next week. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you again to Martin Binfield for coming on the show. It was super great to talk to you. And until we hit you next week, stay safe and keep on podcasting.
Check them out on Steam.